And this goes for every news article that you listen to, every bit of information that we stamp up, that's exactly valid and true. That, because especially if it's singing the praises and the songs of our side. Those are the things I'm really trying to encourage the people that watch this video to incorporate this idea into our lives, especially when literature and information and news and conversation comes into our lives and it feels so good for our side. And when we stamp that as valid, as true, with no conviction, I'm telling you, that is a red flag. That is a red flag that anything that we give that stamp of validation of this is entirely true, if it is not accompanied by a true and deep sense of conviction, I'm telling you, there's more there.
On our walk through the camp, we often encounter the typical face of the born criminal. By way of contrast, the camp itself is marked by exemplary and strictly planned order. Military discipline and punctuality, painstaking cleanliness, and the ornament of careful work on all things are the outstanding features of the whole camp. Their maintenance is unwaveringly carried out by the camp command, with the SS Guard personnel setting a fine example themselves. The inmate's state of health is excellent. The regular lifestyle, good nourishing food and regular sleep, regulated work and rest breaks, the absence of any kind of dissipation and alcoholic excesses have played their part. Discipline in the camp is strict, and the service of the SS on this lonely outpost, keeping guard in the service of the people's community, is hard. The most sacred values of the nation are at stake in this tough setting, but very few think of this when the conversation is about the Dachau concentration camp, because they don't know it. That is why the Illustrierte Beobachter thought it appropriate, with a series of pictures, to present a useful insight into the camp, which primarily wishes to be an educational institution for the simplest basic rules of human coexistence. Article from news publication Illustrierter Beobachter, December 3, 1936.
For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 13 through 15.
Hello, everyone. Sunday Night Word, and another one of those where we find ourselves in almost on the other side of the world. We're in Germany, but you can see around. I'll try to put some pictures. It's probably one of the most beautiful towns that I've ever been to. I'll butcher this name, Rothenburg Abditur. Look it up. Yesterday, we did not want to pass up the opportunity, being in this area of the world, to make a somber trip. It was about 2.5-hour drive, and we drove to the Dachau concentration camp. And this is not a part of this country's history that is hidden, and with good reason. There's so much to be gained by looking at the atrocities of World War II, and particularly being in this soil. I wanted to, for myself and family, we wanted to make that trip and see for ourselves in person the landscape. It really puts some tangible memories and feeling to more than what we've been taught. So there's certain areas in the world that I was having a conversation with someone the other day about this, that are demand so much weight of the moment and where you are, that no one has to tell you to be quiet. The reverence is in the the landscape itself and the situation, the place itself, the first time I ever felt that was at Ground Zero. We had the opportunity to be in New York before the memorial was built. It was just a giant hole in the earth. But the feeling of that moment, like I said, no one had to tell their children to even be quiet. It was very weighty. And then later on, we found ourselves in the hidden rooms where Anne Frank and her family hid during this World War II in Amsterdam. And again, it was the heaviness, the weight of what that signified, and the lives that were lived and extinguished in both of those places. Thirdly was the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis. We stumbled upon that. We didn't plan on being there, but we came when it was not closed. The memorial was closed, and we drove up, and that same feeling of history stumbled here. It's like the whole world paused for a moment in these exact places. And here in Germany, Dachau is probably the weightiest of all of these that I've mentioned to you, feeling wise. And now going back, and this is what the subject I wanted to bring to you in our scope of things, the way we look at it in literature and words themselves, is that being in those places, in those moments, and particularly at the concentration camp these last few days, it's so undeniable what is going on with the feeling and that and being there. But what I realized is it is exactly the opposite. It's completely deniable. It is completely deniable, and it is deniable through the power of words. It is deniable through the power of literature. The words that you heard during that video were not words. Those were an actual newspaper article that I used AI, speech to text, exactly, text turned into speech, to be read aloud. But this was a newspaper article from 1936 from that area, the Dachau area, of what the people of this town would read to explain what is happening in their own backyard. It is, you would think, undeniable. But through the power and the deceptive power that words can have, and the real shrouding of truth, or maybe highlighting just the smallest, most complimentary parts of truth, and as the reader, we do not decide to dig deeper into that truth. The Bible verse going in accompaniment with this idea is the responsibility on us that messages that come to us, information that comes to us, it has to go through our filter of is this true? And there's a onus of weight on the person receiving information to decide if this is true, and if it is, in what scope. And this newspaper article, I think, really highlights that you can be deceived, especially when you are willing, especially when it kind of tickles the ear, when it caters to your situation. It's a good thing for you, for your side. And we are not far removed from this article in 1936 and in 2026. In fact, in many ways, we are in a more precarious position when it comes to deciding what information is true or deceptive. And the power of rhetoric, the power of words, is so powerful that it can convince a person that the words themselves, the rhetoric being brought into someone's life, is more true than the evidence that is literally in their backyard or at their fingertips. When the residents, many of the residents, not all, many of the residents of Dachau read this newspaper article, it was good enough. They didn't want to know anymore. The idea that this was a just and verdant concentration camps for the lowest criminals. In 60, it says born criminals, as if these people were already slated to this fate that this mechanism of the Nazi movement was just carrying out. some decision that had been made somewhere else, that these were born criminals and work shy, and they did not have this nationalist blood, that they were being just, the process was just being carried in a just way. And to not ask questions about this words coming across led to many people having these atrocities done in their backyard and saying, we didn't know. But through the tour of this concentration camp and through the podcast that we listened to on the way there to inform ourselves, we found that actually everyone did know. It was well known what was going on. And the information, if you wanted to know, was well known. But coupled with that information was also the truth that if you were to make waves, if you were to stand up, there would be some accompanying real punishment unto death, even of natural born citizens of Germany of that time. There's a picture of a young man that really struck me in the tour. And he was probably 22, 23 years old. And the only criminal offense that could be slated to his name, the reason he found himself in this concentration camp, is because he was found with leaflets saying that, hey, what we're being told is not true. There's things going on here. And he was more than ostracized or criticized. He was put into this concentration camp, and he lost his life there. He is one of the bodies that littered these unmarked graves for saying that what we're being told is not true. So, it's much like Plato's allegory of the cave, the man coming back, declaring what we see is not true. These are just shadows. The people that are comfortable with the shadows says, this guy is a troublemaker and he should be killed. All the way back, this is Plato's time, and we see this obviously playing out today. And I think it's ingrained in our psyche as well that sometimes it's best not to know. I want to share with you something in this trip that has really found its way, I think, into the rest of my life. And I think it's a principle that is so true that I've put it through multiple cycles of thought, and I have found it outlive that crucible of demand of what I'm saying. Is this statement going to be true? And this is what I want to share with you about determining what is true in life, in taking in information and the way we give out information, is that how to implement a godly filter and say this is true. And I found this first interacting and giving my life over to God. I found that the scripture that says he is the way and he is the truth. He is the truth, meaning God himself is truth, not a variation of, not a sampling of, but in entirety, he is truth. And there's no part of this truth that is hidden from him. Hidden from us, yes. And this is the principle I want to share with you. The more exposure to truth we have, and I mean that in the sense of reality and truth and in a grand sense, but also being in God's presence, there is always, and here's the principle, always accompanied with that exposure to truth is conviction. And this is the feeling that I get when I really get into God's presence. Is there's joy, yes, there's happiness, yes, but there is always a sense of conviction, of humbling, of me putting myself and my flesh in the place that it deserves. And that's on its knees in reverence to God himself. And I want to tell you, even down to the smallest observation, I found this works, is that to decide if something is true and into what measure it would be, that there has to be a level of conviction. And this goes to the newspaper article in 1936 that there was some certainly truths in there, some hard facts about dates and times and what was happening in a sense, but there was no conviction. Meaning that if I was to put this newspaper article through the filter that I'm speaking of, I would have to demand of myself to ask more questions. And it is not many steps down the road until those questions would lead to, there is a much broader truth here, and I am convicted because I am being exposed to something that is greater than myself. and humbling. It certainly puts me in my place. And this young man, this picture who I alluded to, asked those questions. You can hear the church bells going off. They just went off through the whole city, and we've got one still going. But the young man that his picture was hung there in memoriam asked these questions, and not only came to a conviction that there was more than he was being told in this article, he took action and had leaflets to disperse this feeling of conviction that he felt himself. He had encountered a broader truth, and he took action. That action certainly had consequence. And this is an idea to wrestle with. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to know truth that there is almost these guaranteed, at least ostracization from some people, but only these guaranteed negative reactions from comfortable situations? Is it worth it? And many could look at this young man's life who lost it in this concentration camp for just saying there's something going on here, that there's something more to this Nazi movement than we're being told. Was it worth it? Is it worth it for you to stand up and say, the current news source that my social circle says is so genuine, might not be. There might be a little bit more to this story. There might be a little bit more to these ideas than this black and white, very tailored information that I'm being given, that this subject is just so standard that there's no other way to look at it about immigration or war or gender or there's no other way. There's just no other way to look at it. And if a person was to stand up like this young man did and said that, there's more here, because when I hear that information, I have no conviction. It tickles the ear too much. It keeps me in place too much. It spurs me to action too little. Is it worth it? And I would say that, yes. I just, a life lived without truth in it I don't know that it's a life lived. I think it's an existence in something that is so sheltered from what could be. And it is our desire to be in God's presence, and He is truth. So why would we shy away from any aspect of what is real and what is true? We should ask. We should ask. We should know. Now, this principle I'm speaking about, that all truth, given the broad enough scope, will be accompanied with conviction. Like I said, it goes all the way down to the minutest thing. I could say, this town square that we're standing in, that building is yellow. Now, that's true. I think. If you start looking at, so we can get into philosophy, and there's certainly many philosophers that would tell you, how do you know that building's yellow? But just ask the questions. Okay, that's true. Fine. Let's assume that building is yellow. And then you start going down the question that you can say, okay, what is the broader scheme? That why is it yellow? Is there a reason? And you would find many of these buildings here are colored in this way, and they have even remnants of old paintings on the roof of red crosses to pretend to be churches so they wouldn't be bombed in World War II. The hotel we're staying at, the man's family's owned it for 4 generations. He tells me the story about the colors and about painting red crosses on the roof in hopes that him and his family, which they had nowhere to go, and this was their business, wouldn't be turned to rubble by a bomb. They were caught up in a national warfare and fight that they had no part in. But what I'm telling you is there's conviction even in that, right? Like asking, why is this building yellow, could lead me to a point where instead of saying even in World War II, there was good guys and there was bad guys, there's a broader truth, and that there was millions and millions of just individuals trying to figure things out. Germans and Americans and French and Japanese. There's just more to it. Everything that we label true, given this filter, does it bring conviction? If the answer is no, it means there's more there. You need more exposure to what we call true. And this goes for every news article that you listen to, every bit of information that we stamp up. That's exactly valid and true. Because especially if it's singing the praises and the songs of our side. Those are the things. Those are the things I'm really trying to encourage the people that watch this video to incorporate this idea into our lives, especially when literature and information and news and conversation comes into our lives and it feels so good for our side. And when we stamp that as valid, as true, with no conviction, I'm telling you, that is a red flag. That is a red flag, that anything that we give that stamp of validation of this is entirely true, if it is not accompanied by a true and deep sense of conviction, I'm telling you, there's more there. There's more there. We can't be like the people of the cow in the neighborhood who read this news article and said, that's good enough. That's all I want to know. We need to want to know more. We need to be willing to hurt. We need to be willing to let the truth strip away some of these things, that this outside veneer that we have, that we are the good guys and everyone else is not. I love you. I'm going to get back to looking at this beautiful town. I'll see you guys in 7 days. Bring it on Monday.